The Galactic Assembly laughed. Literally. On the floor of the Interstellar Accord Hall, representatives from over 50 alien species cackled and jeered when the Terran envoy presented Earth's formal military contribution. A single cruiser, flanked by 5 barely space-worthy escort frigates. The holographic projection of the Terran fleet looked like a joke next to the sprawling armadas of the Kevrathi, or the Vulcan Empire. High Lord Velcor of the Draven Collective let out a shrieking wheeze that passed for a laugh. "Is this a diplomatic gesture? A ceremonial offering?" he mocked, his mandibles clicking with amusement. Commander Holt sat still, his back rigid and jaw clenched. His face showed nothing. But his eyes? Oh, they burned. Burned with a fury only humans knew how to bottle deep until the moment was right. Earth had been allowed into the Accord 2 years ago. Barely. Considered primitive, emotional, and too volatile to be trusted, the Terrans were treated like interstellar pests. The only reason they'd been given a seat at the table was because they held a strategic jump gate position no one else could crack without them. A necessary evil, and so the humans came, quietly, observing, listening, learning. Commander Holt stood now, his voice low but steady. "We may not match your numbers," he said slowly, "but we don't need to. 1 ship will be enough." The laughter resumed. Weeks passed. The war began, not on Earth's terms. A rogue swarm of biomechanical horrors, the Yathari brood, began invading border worlds, obliterating colonies, harvesting DNA like a plague with a purpose. Entire fleets vanished, thousands dead in hours. Panic swept the Assembly. Worlds once arrogant about their defenses crumbled. The Assembly's grand fleets launched a joint strike to push back the brood. Over 200 ships, 30 species, and trailing behind them, as if forgotten, the lone Terran vessel, TSV Retribution. It was old by alien standards, scarred, black steel against the shimmering silvers and glowing blues of alien craft. No flashy bio-neural interfaces, no quantum veil tech, just armor, guns, and human spite carved into every welded plate. Inside, Holt stood before his crew, eyes sweeping across 100 pairs of steely gazes. Veterans, survivors, misfits trained to fight with their backs against the wall. He smiled. "They think we're a joke. Let's make them choke on their laughter." The alien fleets hit the Yathari swarm hard, but it wasn't enough. Their weapons, light-based, elegant, precise, failed against the shifting frequencies of the brood's living shields. One by one, the proudest ships of the galaxy went dark, until the Retribution moved forward. Alone. It powered through the debris fields of better ships, past the corpses of fallen warriors, right into the heart of the swarm. No finesse, no negotiation. Holt gave the order. "Bring hell." The first shot wasn't elegant. It was an old-fashioned kinetic slug, accelerated to a fraction of light speed. It tore through a brood mothership like it was made of tissue. The second barrage came from magnetic rail turrets. Explosions rippled across the alien formation. The brood screamed. The Assembly gasped. And still the Terran ship kept coming. Because where others fought to protect, they fought to avenge. And now they had a galaxy's worth of blood debt to collect. The command deck of the TSV Retribution pulsed with a low red glow, the emergency lighting casting shadows over worn steel, aging monitors, and faces carved by war. Smoke drifted from a fried console at engineering. Ensign Drew was already on it, sleeves rolled up, cursing beneath his breath in the way only humans did, with that blend of rage and defiance that made the universe nervous. Commander Holt stood in the center, motionless, a statue among chaos. The ship's tremors hadn't stopped since they'd broken through the second layer of Yathari formations. Not because of a malfunction, because they were hitting back harder than anything the brood had seen. And now, the enemy was adapting. "Sir, we've got incoming. 3 brood cutters closing on port flank, 1,200 meters and closing," barked Lieutenant Ramos, her voice steady even as a piece of the ceiling cracked above her. "Divert batteries 2 and 4. Give me saturation fire on all 3, center mass." She didn't ask if that would work. She just did it. That's why Holt kept her. Outside, the Retribution's old hull shimmered under the weight of return fire. Acid beams splashed across her flanks. Organic plasma tendrils lashed out like living whips, tearing through space with eerie grace. But the ship held. Because unlike the others, the Retribution didn't rely on smart shielding, evasive algorithms, or predictive threat assessments. She trusted her armor, her crew, and the ruthlessness of human engineering. She was a hammer, not a scalpel. Built not to dance with death, but to drive it backward. The brood cutters shrieked in binary tones, their organic exteriors flexing as they tried to adapt their structure mid-battle. The first exploded as 6 180mm slugs ripped through its nerve cluster. The second banked away. But too late. A high-explosive shell detonated mid-pursuit, bathing it in raw flame. The third tried to retreat. Bad choice. From beneath the Retribution's forward prow, a hidden missile bay opened. 1 warhead, old-school fission, banned by the Accord. Holt grinned coldly. "Fire!" The missile streaked out and struck the cutter dead center. There was no glow, no pretty spectacle, just a sudden, vicious erasure. The vacuum didn't even flinch, but the brood screamed again, those that remained. Then came the shift. The swarm retracted. All across the fleet formation, what was left of the Accord's grand forces watched in silence as the tide turned. The brood, so confident minutes ago, began to fold back, not out of strategy, but fear. Biological minds didn't fear in a way sentience understood, but they reacted to pain, to disruption. To death they hadn't anticipated, and they hadn't anticipated humanity. "Sir," Ramos said, her eyes wide. "They're retreating." "They're regrouping," Holt corrected. "Don't mistake reaction for surrender. They're not used to bleeding. We just introduced them to that concept, and like all first-timers, they'll come back angrier." He turned to the communications console. "Open a channel to the rest of the fleet." Technician Lau glanced back. "Open, sir. Broadcasting now." Holt stepped forward, voice low, graveled by war. "This is Commander Holt of the Terran space vessel Retribution. If you're hearing this, congratulations. You're still breathing. Most aren't." Static hissed, then silence. Some channels lit up green, others remained red. Too many red. "You wanted Terrans to prove themselves? You wanted to laugh at our numbers, our tech, our place in your little interstellar club?" Holt leaned closer. "Then watch. Watch what happens when you force a dying race to pick up its sword again." He paused. "Because we didn't come to participate. We came to win." He cut the feed. A murmur passed through the remaining fleet. The silence wasn't peace. It was awe. For a century, the galaxy had measured strength in sophistication. Tech specs, quantum matrices, how well you could avoid confrontation, pacify your enemy, survive on diplomacy. But now they saw a ship that didn't want to survive. It wanted vengeance, and it was good at getting it. On the other side of the sector, aboard the Vulcan warcruiser Spire of Balance, Admiral Olnix floated in frustration, his translucent fins twitching in disgust. He'd dismissed the Terrans hours ago. Primitive animals, too emotional for space. Now, that same animal was carving through the swarm with ancient weapons and stubborn fury. "Why do they not flee?" Olnix asked his advisor. "The enemy is biologically superior. Tactical advantage is lost." His second, a tall, thin Kalresh, responded flatly. "Perhaps, Admiral, because they are too angry to die." Olnix said nothing. In silence, they watched as another brood carrier ruptured under Terran fire. Back on the Retribution, Holt moved through the corridors. The lights flickered intermittently. Engineering was holding the reactor steady by what felt like willpower alone. He passed by medbay. 6 stretchers lined the hall. One crewman was already covered, his dog tags resting quietly on his chest. Private Ames, barely 23, from New Mexico. "Take care of him," Holt told the medic. She nodded, lips tight. He kept walking. In the gun deck, Sergeant Creeves was coordinating repairs on the autoloaders, shouting over the screech of hydraulic presses and the scent of scorched steel. Holt stopped beside him. "We good for another push?" Creeves glanced at the console. "She'll hold. She's pissed off, just like the rest of us." "She's a ship, Creeves." "She's more than that, sir, and you know it." Holt didn't respond. Maybe Creeves was right. Retribution had been through too much. She'd survived the Rigel collapse, the Delos drift, even the mutiny at Port Karga. Every plate on her hull told a story. Every creak in the frame echoed a battle cry. This wasn't a vessel. It was a coffin that refused to close. And now it was humanity's final answer to a universe that thought them weak. Hours later, they broke through the 3rd layer of the swarm. What waited beyond wasn't defense. It was a nest, an entire brood hive, kilometers across, organic, pulsing, guarded by things even the archives hadn't classified. The Accord had called them unkillables, massive constructs of carapace and cannon, part flesh, part fusion core, capable of obliterating entire cities. One had taken out 3 Dreven dreadnoughts in a single sweep last month. Retribution didn't slow. "Target that thing," Holt said calmly. "Sir, we don't have the payload for something that size," Ramos warned. "We do," he replied. "You just don't like it." She blinked. "The core?" He nodded once. "Arm it." Deep in the bowels of the ship, an ancient payload was prepped. It wasn't nuclear. It wasn't even Terran. It was something humanity had recovered during a salvage operation near Andromeda's fringe. Alien tech, reverse-engineered, unstable, but effective. The command crew watched as the unkillable began moving. Its eyes, glowing pits of pure energy, locked onto the Retribution. "Steady," Holt said. "It's charging. Let it." At the last moment, Holt whispered, "Release!" The weapon launched. The unkillable fired. Both met mid-space, and the universe went white. When the light cleared, silence reigned. The unkillable was gone. No explosion, no remains. Just absence. And the Retribution? She drifted, charred, scarred, but whole. Ramos broke the silence. "I don't understand. That weapon? It bent gravity. It erased the ship." Holt looked tired. "No," he said. "It reminded it what fear looks like." The Galactic Assembly met in emergency session days later. Gone were the smirks. Gone was the laughter. In their place, respect and fear. Humanity had arrived, not with ceremony or grand speeches, but with fire and wrath, and one battered ship that made gods bleed. The TSV Retribution floated like a wounded beast amid the graveyard of its enemies. The Ythari swarm had broken formation after the annihilation of their unkillable, pulling back with an animal instinct alien minds rarely acknowledged: self-preservation. Inside the command deck, the air was heavy with smoke and victory. Not celebration. Victory. Because for Terrans, those two were not the same. Lieutenant Ramos was the first to speak, her voice hoarse from hours at her station. "Structural integrity is holding at 53%. Starboard railgun offline. Life support in Deck C is failing." Holt, standing rigid in the center of the deck, responded without flinching. "Seal off C. Divert power to the guns. They'll be back." A low murmur passed through the crew. Even the thought of another round with the swarm caused a ripple of exhaustion. But not Holt. He didn't get tired. He just got more dangerous. The silence was broken by an incoming hail. Ramos glanced over. It's Admiral Tonic of the Kalari Coalition. He's requesting direct contact. Holt gave a short nod. The holographic display flickered before forming into the blue-skinned, bioluminescent image of Admiral Tonic. His robes were charred. His pride, clearly more so. "Commander Holt," Tonic began, voice tense. "On behalf of the Accord Fleet, we acknowledge your vessel's performance." Holt raised an eyebrow. "You're welcome," he said simply. Tonic blinked, confused by the curt reply. "What exactly was that weapon?" "Classified. You just erased a threat that took out 3 Dreven warships like they were shuttlecraft. I believe the Accord has a right to—" "No," Holt interrupted. "You believed humanity had no right to be here. You believed we were primitives clinging to steel and spite. Now you're worried we might have something you don't understand." Tonic's voice rose. "You're playing a dangerous game, Terran." Holt stepped closer. "And yet we're still on the board. Where's your fleet, Admiral?" Silence. The feed cut. Holt didn't blink. "Let them stew. We've got bigger problems." He turned toward his tactical officer, Ensign Park. "Status of the swarm?" "Regrouping, but not retreating. Looks like they're pulling energy signatures into one locus. Might be forming a goddamn mega-cluster. Never seen readings like this." Ramos muttered, "You think that was their queen?" Holt shook his head. Number that was her pet. The mood shifted instantly. A strange quiet fell over the crew. Because humans didn't fear dying, they feared losing for no reason. And right now, Holt was calculating the cost of a second engagement with creatures who had just tasted fear for the first time in their evolution. He turned to engineering. "Drew, status on the core?" Drew's face was blackened with soot, hair matted with sweat. "Running hot. We've bypassed 2 regulators. You want to push her again, we're playing Russian roulette with 3 bullets." "Make it happen." Drew grunted and vanished into the steam. As Holt walked back to the viewport, he stared into the stars, cold and silent. That's when it hit him. The war wasn't won, not even close. They had drawn blood, sure, but the swarm was adjusting, evolving, and the galaxy was watching, not to help, to decide whether they needed humanity at all. Hours later, they intercepted a transmission not meant for them. Encrypted, sloppy encryption. Ramos decrypted it in under 5 minutes. It was from the Dreven Collective. A private message to the Vulcan and Kalari command nodes. Holt listened in silence. The human ship has demonstrated clear instability in both command structure and weapons protocol. We cannot allow an unvetted species to carry such a strategic asset. Recommend neutralization under Clause 17 of the Preemptive Threat Doctrine. Authorization pending. Ramos looked up. "They're planning to destroy us." Holt didn't move. "Let them try." "But why? We just saved their asses." Holt turned slowly. "Because they hate what they don't control. And right now, they don't control us." Silence again. But this time it was hard. Hard like a clenched fist. Retribution's next move wasn't diplomatic. It wasn't tactical. It was purely Terran. They broke ranks, pulled from the main Accord fleet, and began a solo burn into the heart of Ithari territory. Ramos had objected. So did Creeves. Even Park looked pale. But Holt was resolute. "If they're planning to eliminate us, we don't have the luxury of waiting for betrayal," he explained. "We finish what we started, before they finish us." "What are we even trying to hit?" Ramos demanded. Holt brought up a file. It was crude, partial scans, glitched telemetry, but clear enough. At the center of the Ithari swarm was a structure. Not quite a ship, not a planet, a womb, alive, feeding, breeding, generating swarm units by the hundreds every hour. It hadn't moved. It didn't need to. The brood came from it, fought for it, died for it. Ramos stared. "You want to kill the mother?" "No," Holt corrected. "I want to kill God." They flew for 17 hours without contact. No transmissions, no backup, no reinforcements. Just the groaning of the hull and the hum of the engines, now jury-rigged and barely holding together. Retribution bled coolant like a wounded predator. But she kept moving. The stars thinned. The background radiation shifted. And then they saw it. The womb. It hung in space like a tumor the size of a moon, pulsing, leaking bioluminescent fluids into the void. Hundreds of living tendrils wrapped around debris, ships, planets, bodies, feeding on them, creating more, and around it, silence. Not a single swarm ship in sight. Ramos whispered, "It's waiting." "No," Holt said, "it knows." They were expected, because the womb wasn't a passive builder. It was sentient. It was aware. Holt gave the order. "Arm everything. No warnings, no talking. Kill the bastard." The battle began not with a bang, but with a whisper. The Retribution launched a salvo of heavy torpedoes. They streaked toward the womb and vanished. Literally. One moment on the radar, the next, gone. Then came the counter. From the folds of the womb, shapes emerged. Not ships, things, constructs of meat and alloy, eyes that weren't eyes, claws that rippled with plasma. They didn't fly. They twisted space around them. They didn't attack. They consumed. The first hit was on Deck D hull breach. 6 dead. The second hit was a psychic burst, broadcast through neural waves. Screaming, crew members staggered. Blood poured from ears. Park threw up. Holt just growled. "Counter with raw frequency noise. Jam it, burn it, make it shut the hell up." Drew rerouted the comms array to blast a stream of high-frequency white noise across every channel. The screaming stopped, but the enemy kept coming. The womb pulsed again. 3 more constructs emerged. Retribution was outnumbered, outgunned, and out of time. But she wasn't out of anger. "Fire the main railgun," Holt ordered. "It's offline," Ramos shouted. "Then throw something at it." Creeves grabbed the comm. "You heard him! Load Deck B's scrap bin into the coil! I want it hot and flying!" Minutes later, a payload of raw junk, metal plates, bolts, even a dismantled turret, was accelerated through the rail system. It struck the womb dead center. A crack appeared. Then came the explosion. A birth scream from the womb, louder than before. Pain, actual pain. She was alive, and she was bleeding. "Again!" Holt yelled. Another strike, another scream, and then something new. The tendrils began retracting, not to attack, to protect. The womb was afraid. The crew cheered, because now it was a race. Who would die first, the last Terran ship or the first alien god? The TSV Retribution groaned under its own momentum, her battered frame pressing toward the monstrous womb like a war dog lunging at a god. The silence between weapons fire throbbed louder than the noise. Every creak of her hull, every flicker of her lights was a countdown to death or something worse. Commander Holt stood like a carved statue amid the shuddering chaos of the bridge. Blood trickled from his right temple. He hadn't noticed, or didn't care. "Status on the second coil railgun?" he snapped. Ramos, coughing from smoke, wiped her nose with her sleeve. "Overheated. Recoil actuators blew last volley. She's done unless we rip her apart and patch manually." "Do it. We'll lose the gravity stabilizers. Then we float. Patch it." Creeves had already vanished into the gun deck before the words even finished. Outside the viewport, the womb shimmered with iridescent flesh, wounded but not beaten. She pulsed with energy like a storm cloud stuffed with lightning. In her final defense, She was no longer summoning constructs or drone ships. She was changing space itself. Reality near her skin began to bend. Hull radar faltered. Engines hiccuped mid-burn. Park screamed from tactical. Gravitic distortion. It's warping local fields. Compass drift at 40 degrees. Mass density spiking. Explain it to me like I'm not married to a physicist, Holt growled. She's turning space into sludge. If we don't move soon, we'll sink into it and never get out. And our weapons? Still piercing, for now. Holt clenched his jaw. Then we shoot until we're empty or dead. Creeves and 2 other engineers, covered in sweat and burns, dragged the second railgun online with bare hands and magnetic clamps. They bypassed safeties, exposed the coils, and hardwired ammo feeds from secondary storages. Manual targeting only, Creeves warned over the comm. No autocorrection. You miss, it's on you. Ramos looked at Holt. You want to fire that thing blind? I've been aiming blind my whole life, Holt muttered. Patch me in. They uploaded raw trajectory data. Holt ran it through his command HUD, adjusting for gravitational turbulence. This wasn't shooting a target. It was guessing where reality would allow a bullet to travel next. Firing solution locked, Park said. Fire! The entire ship groaned like it was giving birth. The railgun screamed, flinging a 500-kilo slug of tempered alloy at near-light speeds into the thickening void. And for a second, it worked. The shot curved, warped, twisted, and landed. Right in the heart of the womb's glowing central mass. The effect was instant. The womb shrieked, not through sound, through thought. Every living mind aboard the Retribution felt it, a raw psychic blast of terror and rage that made stomachs churn and ears bleed. Private Saldana collapsed in the corridor. 2 engineers went catatonic. Even Park vomited beside the helm. Holt staggered, but grinned. She's scared. Ramos, panting, wiped sweat from her neck. She should be. Then came the retaliation. From within the womb's walls, something emerged. Not a ship, not a drone, a creature. It wasn't made, it wasn't built, it was born. Black like tar, tall as buildings, wings that looked like they were spun from broken timelines. It moved between frames like bad film, jerky, blurred, unnatural. And it didn't fly. It arrived. On top of them, the ship rocked, alarms screamed, hull panels blew off. Holt was thrown against a wall, ribs cracking. Ramos was knocked unconscious. Park scrambled to maintain balance as the creature tore into the outer hull like paper. One of its limbs, tentacle, claw, limb, no one knew, pierced through Engineering Deck E and sent a dozen crew members into space, screaming and freezing instantly. Then it began digging. Into the ship. Not to destroy it, to reach Holt. Because somehow the womb knew. He was the mind, the rage, the reason it bled. And it wanted that to end. In the chaos, Holt stumbled into a weapons locker and ripped open the emergency seal. Inside, a prototype exoframe. More mech than armor. Illegal. Banned in most colonies for overkill potential. He stepped in. The suit sealed around him with hydraulic snaps. Inside, systems buzzed online. It fed his brain reflex commands, muscle boosting, neural links. He became a weapon. As the creature burst through the corridor wall and reached a burning claw for the bridge, Holt met it halfway. He didn't shoot. He punched. The impact shook the corridor. The alien shrieked and recoiled, its face imploding from the force. Holt pressed the advantage, slamming a full-armored fist into its gut, then ripping one of its wings clean off. Blood, black and glowing, splashed across the walls. The creature shrieked again, lunging, slicing Holt's shoulder open even through the frame. But he didn't stop. He was a Terran. He was angry, and he was done running. He drove a makeshift pike, a broken piece of pipe sharpened by shrapnel, straight through its skull. The creature went still. then collapsed, dead. Holt, panting, his blood and its ichor dripping from his armor, turned to the intercom. "We're not done. Patch me through." Ramos, half-conscious, managed to slap a console. "All ships," Holt growled. "This is the retribution. You abandoned us, betrayed us, sentenced us." He paused, looking out the cracked window at the pulsing, terrified womb. "Now watch us end what you were too scared to fight." The final assault began. They had no ammunition left, no torpedoes, no backup, just themselves. And the womb. They plotted a course straight into its heart. Suicide. But necessary. "Ramming speed," Holt ordered. Drew, coughing blood, looked up from engineering. "Core is going critical. We can divert it to the forward drive, but it'll cook us alive." "Do it." "No second chances, Commander." There never were. The ship turned. Engines flared. The womb saw them. Tried to run. Too late. The retribution became a bullet, a burning, screaming arrow of human vengeance. As the ship closed in, Holt stood tall at the helm, unblinking. "Let the galaxy remember," he whispered, "what happens when you mock the species that built war out of love and hate." Impact. The world turned white. The womb exploded in a silence so deep it broke communication links for minutes afterward. And when the light faded, there was no womb, no retribution, only silence. And in that silence, for the first time in galactic history, the universe feared humans. The blast radius extended over 20,000 kilometers. Every vessel within range had gone dark temporarily, their sensors scrambled by the whiteout pulse. Communications shut down. Gravitational stabilizers failed. Warp gates shuddered across 3 systems, and in the center of the obliterated silence, there was nothing left. No womb, no retribution, not even debris, just an expanding cloud of particulate ash and organic vapor that shimmered like blood in zero gravity. Across the surviving ships of the Galactic Accord, silence reigned. Not reverence, not mourning. Shock. Because what they'd just witnessed wasn't bravery, it was madness. No protocol, no retreat, no tact. The humans had thrown themselves headlong into a cosmic abomination and erased it from the map, not with superior science or strategy, but raw, blind fury. And it had worked. Admiral Tonic of the Kalari stared at the readings from his command console, knuckles pale. "Is there any confirmation? Black box data? Ejection pods?" he demanded. His aide shook his head. "None. They didn't launch escape beacons. They didn't slow down. They didn't even send a last will." "Idiots," Tonic hissed, but the trembling in his voice betrayed him. They weren't idiots. They were Terrans, and they'd just committed an act so absolute, so horrifying in its effectiveness, that the galaxy no longer knew how to process it. Some called it heroism, others called it a war crime. But every species agreed on one thing. Fear had a new name. Humanity. Back on Earth, the feed reached Central Command 3 minutes after the blast. The AI core that monitored the deep space relays flagged it with one word. Event. Reckoning General Marlowe, head of Terran Planetary Defense, stood before a war room of blinking monitors and watched the last frames of the Retribution's final charge. The moment the womb detonated, the moment humanity announced itself, no ceremony, no posturing, just fire. His aide whispered, "Shall I alert the Accord Council?" Marlowe didn't blink. "No." "Sir." "Let them stew in it." "But, no." He finally turned, expression unreadable. "If the galaxy wants to pretend we're dead, let them. A martyr is harder to kill than a soldier." But the Terrans were not dead. Not all of them. In the outer ring of the detonation cloud, drifting amid irradiated chunks of alien marrow and melted alloy, was a life pod. One, cloaked by debris, its signal buried by the aftermath, its heat signature masked. Inside was Commander Holt, barely alive, bones shattered, skin seared, internal bleeding in 4 organs. The exoframe he'd worn had absorbed the initial impact, but his body had paid the price. His breath was shallow, his vision blurry. But he was conscious. Because dying was too easy for a man like him. He stared through the viewport as the stars spun slowly. Time passed. How much, he didn't know. Then, movement. A salvage vessel, not a Cord, Terran Black Ops. The insignia on its hull was worn, the name painted over twice. TSV Revenant. They weren't here to mourn. They were here to collect. The ship latched onto the pod. Holt lost consciousness before they cracked it open. When he awoke, it was underground. Earthside, not hospital, not military base. A bunker, one of the old Cold War relics refitted for off-grid operations. No signals, no data uplink, just walls of steel and men who didn't exist on any registry. A voice spoke from the shadows. "I was told you were dead." Holt turned his head. It hurt. Everything hurt. The speaker stepped forward. Older man, scarred face, civilian clothes with military posture. Marlowe. Holt coughed. "You disappointed?" Marlowe shook his head. "I'm terrified." Holt's lips cracked into something like a grin. "Good. You realize what you've done? I killed a god. You made one." That stopped Holt cold. Marlowe continued. "The galaxy watched you destroy something they couldn't even comprehend. You didn't just fight, Holt. You made a statement, a species-wide declaration." Holt sat up slowly, wincing. "What now?" Marlowe hesitated. "That depends." "On what?" "Whether we want to remain the underdogs they mock, or become the monsters they fear." Silence. Then Holt looked up and said, "Why not both?" 3 days later, a signal went out, not public, not official, just a ripple. A whisper passed between colonies, smugglers, ex-military. The retribution was gone, but a new project had begun. Project Revenant. A new fleet. No oversight, no Accord interference, no diplomatic restrictions. Built in shadow. Forged from salvaged technology, stolen alien weapons, human spite. No more asking for permission. The next time the galaxy needed saving, they'd get no warning. Just the roar of engines and the vengeance of a species that had already proven one truth. You don't laugh at humanity. You bury it deep, and you pray it never comes back. The halls of the Galactic Accord High Council were no longer filled with laughter. They were sealed, soundproofed, guarded by armored Dreven shock troops and Vulcan sentinels whose loyalty was programmed, not chosen, because paranoia had replaced pride. And behind those sealed walls, the Council argued, not about policy, but about humanity. "They cannot be allowed to rebuild," hissed Velcor, head of the Dreven Collective. His mandibles clicked with every syllable, stress fractures lining his carapace. "We saw what one ship did. One. Imagine if they rearm. Imagine if they multiply." Admiral Olnix of the Vulcan Empire folded his tendrils. "We do not imagine. We prepare. Surveillance drones have already lost signal in 6 Terran sectors. Their colonies have gone dark. They're not rebuilding. They're hiding." "Worse," croaked a Calresh diplomat from the corner. "They're preparing." A deep hush followed. Even the Kalari representative, Tonic, sat stiffly. "I propose we invoke Protocol 87, Velcor said. Gasps. Eyes widened. Monitors flickered. Protocol 87. Preemptive total neutralization. It had only been considered once, during the rise of the Raykari hive mind, a policy that authorized the sterilization of an entire species if they were judged an existential threat. "We're not exterminators," Olnix muttered. Velcor leaned in. then prepare for extinction. The vote was tabled, but the seed had been planted, and Earth was now a target. In orbit above Mars, deep in the shadows of its cold moons, Project Revenant took shape. The base didn't exist on any official Terran map. It was a mining station on record. But in reality, it was a birthplace of something new. Inside, Holt stood in front of the first prototype, TSV Dirge, longer than Retribution, sleeker, heavier armor, advanced stealth plating, no windows, only internal sensors, built not for survival, but eradication. "She'll move like a ghost," the engineer whispered. "Fast enough to outrun most enemy scans, quiet enough to bury a kill before they even look up." Holt didn't respond. He just stared, and then asked, "Weapon systems?" The engineer hesitated. "We've pushed the envelope, recovered alien scrap from the womb cloud, coupled it with old-world kinetic mass drivers." "Test it." They did. A remote asteroid was designated as target. The Dirge fired one projectile. It wasn't fast, it wasn't smart, it was violent. The asteroid disintegrated, not shattered, not cracked, unmade. Holt turned to his team. "I want 5 more, quiet, dispersed, ready in 6 months." They didn't ask why. They'd read the classified transmissions, seen the intercepted council logs. They knew Earth was no longer a participant in galactic politics. It was a countdown. Back in the colonies, humanity had changed. Gone was the desperate clamor for inclusion. No more ambassadors, no more outreach. Now, Terran systems had gone silent. Trade routes were severed. Civilians were recalled. Orbital ports shut down overnight. On the outer colonies, children were taught how to spot reconnaissance drones. In inner systems, AI models ran war simulations 24/7. In old bunkers, deep in Earth's crust, conscription algorithms selected the next wave of operators, not for war, but for revenge. All without a single public speech. Humanity didn't rally, it remembered. Aboard the TSV Dirge, Holt watched the crew during their first live exercise. They didn't cheer, they didn't joke, they executed. Each operator had passed psychological screening so brutal that only 12% survived the evaluation process. Veterans, orphans, dissidents, all broken by war, all remade by hatred. No loyalty to Earth, loyalty to retribution. That was their creed. A new insignia had been stamped onto their uniforms, a crimson skull wrapped in orbital rings with 3 stars. One for the womb, one for the council, one for the next target. Because they were not here to police peace. They were a message, and their message was, "You laughed at our weakness. Now choke on our wrath." The first strike came without warning. A brood splinter cell, leftover, feral, still harvesting biological matter on an uncharted moon, was wiped out. Not attacked, wiped, outside. No heat signatures, no survivors, not even remains. Just a crater laced with melted armor and the lingering stench of Terran propellant. When the Accord got the data feed, they panicked. The Vulcan sent a scout team. The ship didn't return. 2 days later, an anonymous signal pulsed across 3 major galactic comboys. A distorted voice. One sentence, "We finish what you flee from." Then silence. The council scrambled. The Dreven demanded an immediate escalation. The Kalari voted to open talks. The Vulcan hesitated. And the humans? They didn't respond at all. In the galactic underworld, the legend of retribution grew. Merchants in black market bars told stories of a single Terran ship outgunning a fleet. Bounty hunters whispered about the womb killers. No one called them heroes. They called them wolves. And in a galaxy that prized diplomacy, the return of predators sent ripples through every system. Inside Holt's quarters aboard the Dirge, a message waited, encrypted, unmarked. He opened it. A single image, the council vote. They were moving toward Protocol 87. A countdown had begun. But Holt didn't panic. He smiled. Because the more they feared humanity, the more they revealed their own weakness. And when the Council finally struck, when they came to sterilize the species they had underestimated for centuries, they would find no cities, no armies, no defense, just ships like Dirge, waiting, burning, and ready to prove that humans may die, but they always die last. The Galactic Accord moved fast. The vote passed. Protocol 87 was officially enacted. Every Accord fleet within striking distance was ordered to engage Terran assets with full force. No negotiations, no prisoners. This was not war. It was cleansing. Because now Earth wasn't just feared. It was hated for what it reminded them. That despite their advancement, their diplomacy, their genetic purity, there still existed a race that didn't care for ceremony or superiority. One that fought not for territory or pride, but for vengeance. The first attack came at Gliese 54C, a minor Terran mining colony. 16 Accord warships descended, bristling with EMP torpedoes and nanite suppression grids. They expected resistance. They expected surface batteries. They didn't expect an empty world. No people, no signals. Only one structure left intact. A monolith. Black steel, and carved into it, in perfect galactic common. "You're late." One of the Vulcan officers scanned the soil. "Their people were here, just gone." A Dreven commander hissed. "Evacuated?" "No," the Vulcan muttered. "Relocated." Then their sensors picked up a spike, high orbit. Too late. The trap had already sprung. 5 Terran stealth mines detonated simultaneously. Not explosive, electromagnetic fission. They didn't destroy ships. They gutted them. Every control panel fried, every drone offline. Ships didn't explode. They just died. Floated. Cold. Silent. The Accord had walked into a phantom zone, and Earth didn't even bother watching. At Council headquarters, panic erupted. "How did they vanish?" Velcor shrieked. "Entire populations gone. Our spies reported over 500,000 colonists there just a month ago." Tanek didn't speak. He just stared at the battlefield footage, hands trembling. He saw the monolith. He read the message. He understood the psychological warfare at play. Humans weren't hiding. They were preparing, and every attempt to preempt them only made them stronger. Olnix finally broke the silence. "I propose a recall, a pause. This isn't a military operation anymore. It's a crucifixion." Velcor spat. "You're weak. And you're already dead. You just don't know it yet." In a classified meeting beneath Mars, Commander Holt stood over a holographic star map. Red points marked confirmed Terran evacuations. Blue points were still monitored by the Accord. Green points. Those were his. Each green node wasn't a planet. It was a shipyard. Secret ones. Undetectable. Scattered across asteroid fields, gas giant moons, deep crust facilities. One of them even orbited a black hole, using its radiation shadow to remain invisible. Beside Holt, Ramos, alive, scarred but back in uniform, nodded. "They think we're spread thin." "They think wrong," Holt replied. "Let them burn fuel chasing ghosts." A younger officer piped in. "Sir, with the activation of Protocol 87, Earth is now the prime target. They'll come for it. Every fleet." Holt looked up. "Good." 3 weeks later, they did. An armada of 70 ships, mixed species, high-yield plasma arrays, gravitic warheads, shielded carriers. They reached Earth's orbit expecting a battle. They found nothing. No defense satellites, no orbital guns, no fleet, just clouds and silence. One Vulcan captain laughed. "This is Earth, this is the threat?" Then the clouds parted, and hell fell from the sky. The TSV Dirge decloaked right inside the lead formation, followed by 6 others, the Revenant fleet, silent, deadly, and unleashed. Each ship fired on separate vectors, no coordination, no formation, just chaos, because humans didn't fight to win territory, they fought to kill. The lead carrier exploded in one salvo. A Dreven destroyer tried to retaliate, only for a Terran spike missile to pierce its core and detonate inside its AI brain. The Accord ships panicked, tried to scatter, but the Dirge's fleet wasn't pursuing. They were herding, toward low orbit, toward Earth's trap. From the oceans, cannons rose. Ancient tech fused with alien systems. They weren't visible from space, they weren't detectable. But when they fired, every satellite across 3 systems recorded it. Massive bursts of plasma-piercing railfire, each shot aimed with rage, not precision. Within 7 minutes, the Accord Armada lost 32 ships. The others fled. No pursuit. Holt watched from Mars Command, silent. "They'll be back," Ramos said. He nodded. "They'll bring more." She hesitated. "And when they do?" He didn't smile. He grinned. "Then we show them the real fleet." Because what the galaxy hadn't realized was that retribution was not just a ship, it was a doctrine, a philosophy. One ship had changed the war. Now there were dozens, and soon there would be hundreds, all built with the same core principle: let the enemy laugh, let them underestimate, and when they open fire, make them regret living. The war was no longer fought in numbers. It was fought in fear. And the Accord had never been more afraid. Across 5 sectors, galactic commerce collapsed. Shipping lanes were abandoned. Colonies disconnected themselves from Accord networks to avoid being seen as sympathizers, because to be associated with Earth was now dangerous. But to be associated against Earth? That was fatal. The Revenant fleet no longer waited for attack. It had gone on the offensive. Terran ships began appearing inside enemy strongholds without warning. They didn't declare war. They didn't negotiate. They simply arrived, destroyed what needed to be destroyed, and vanished like ghosts. The Dreven lost 3 breeding moons in 1 week. The Kalari homeworld was forced to declare planetary lockdown after orbital communications were jammed by a Terran satellite that somehow spoke back to every citizen with this message: "You are not at war with us. You are in our way." Panic became standard. And then, Earth made contact, not through the Council, not through ambassadors, through a single broadcast. Commander Holt appeared, seated in what looked like a steel-walled command room. No medals, no flag, just that same cold stare. "To those still pretending you're in control, let this end. We didn't ask for war. We responded to extermination. You voted to erase us. Now you realize that death doesn't silence humans. It summons us. You want terms? Here's one. Stop. All aggression. Dismantle Protocol 87. Apologize, or we will remove your ability to speak permanently." "This is not a threat. This is a mirror. Look at yourselves." "We became monsters because you demanded it. And we got good at it." The message repeated on loop across every system. The Council went into emergency session again. This time, no one laughed. This time, some didn't even show up. In the void between star systems, Holt stood aboard the bridge of the TSV Revenant, the new flagship. The Dirge was now a sister ship, part of a trio known as the Choir of Vengeance, each with its own doctrine. Dirge, silence before the strike. Elegy, fear before the scream. Requiem, ashes after the end. Each one had a captain who'd once been part of the Retribution's bloodline, officers who had seen the womb die, who'd tasted death and didn't flinch. "Status?" Holt asked. Ramos stood beside him, older now, weathered, cold as steel. Elegy struck a Dreven research lab on Sethir 8. No survivors. They were developing mind-crippling nanoviruses. We destroyed the files, too. Push the logs to the Accord network. Let them know their science died with their hubris. He paused. And the Requiem? She hesitated. It attacked a refugee ship. Holt turned sharply. Whose? Vulcan. Full of escapees. Mostly civilians. He went still. How many dead? Over 3,000. Silence. He didn't rage. Didn't cry. He stared out the viewport for nearly a full minute. Then said, "Pull them from the fleet. Strip the command staff. Issue charges. We're not the council. We don't kill innocents." Ramos looked away. But Holt knew the truth. The line was already blurring. The war had changed them. And maybe that was okay, because Earth didn't start this. But now that it had its teeth in, it refused to let go. Meanwhile, on the Accord side, fractures split the once mighty alliance. The Kalari threatened to withdraw entirely, calling the Council's leadership morally bankrupt and tactically suicidal. The Vulcan began secret talks with independent Terran colonies. Even among the Dreven, military commanders began disappearing. Some believed killed, others believed to have joined Holt's quiet revolution. And in a desperate move, the Council authorized a final project, Savior Protocol. They would build a weapon, an AI supermind, fused with captured Terran tech and Draven biocode. It wouldn't just strike Earth. It would erase Terran identity from the galactic grid, history, culture, databanks, even memories, the perfect war. But it needed one thing: time. Holt found out within 48 hours. A former Calresh diplomat defected, passed the information in exchange for asylum. "Why tell us?" Ramos asked. The alien hissed. "Because even the Council's allies have nightmares, and in every one of them you smile before we die." Holt read the schematics. Location, Glintax Station. Deep space outpost shielded by quantum cloaking. He made his decision instantly. "All ships, ready engines. We're ending this. Now." The Revenant fleet gathered in silence. No speeches. No morale briefings. They didn't need them. They were vengeance incarnate. The choir took point, flanked by the new whalers, small Terran vessels with high-output EMP cores designed to burn mines without breaking hulls. The fleet jumped to Glintax and entered hell. The Accord had known they'd come. 58 ships waited, plus planetary cannons, plus satellite nukes. It didn't matter. Holt raised one hand. Make history. And they did. The choir split formation. Dirge dove straight into cannon fire, absorbing impact with deflection plating and giving Requiem a clear shot. Elegy disappeared, its cloaking tech letting it blink between firing cycles, appearing behind ships before they could react. Whalers struck the satellite net, frying half the Accord's tracking systems. The AI housing chamber was protected by 12 defense turrets. Holt and a small drop team breached it in person. Close combat. No prisoners. He reached the AI core, a glowing synthetic brain the size of a cathedral. It spoke. "You cannot stop inevitability." He placed a charge at its base. "I just did," and blew it. When the dust settled, Glintax was gone. The Savior AI didn't speak again. And the Accord? It fell silent. For the first time in over 500 years, the Galactic Accord officially dissolved. Every member state went separate ways. Some rebuilt, some isolated, some just vanished. Earth didn't claim victory. It just stopped. Because the war wasn't about winning. It was about reminding. And now, they remembered. 1 year later, Holt stood on Earth's surface, overlooking the rebuilt ruins of old Geneva. Nature had taken most of it back. Birds chirped, wind whispered. Behind him, Ramos walked up. "Peace, huh?" He didn't turn. "Maybe. They still watch us, still fear us. They should." And what about us? He exhaled. We'll wait, in the shadows, not as tyrants, not as heroes. He finally looked at her. As consequences. She smiled. A faint one. You think they'll ever forget? He shook his head. No. They laughed at the tiny fleet. He nodded. Now every one of them builds their fleets just a little smaller, hoping we don't notice. They stood there, silent, and behind them, hidden beneath the mountain. The next fleet slept, just in case the galaxy ever needed another lesson. In fire, in defiance, in retribution.